Hi and welcome to Access Chat. We're really glad to have Marco Pasqua with us today. Marco is joining us from the warmer west coast of Canada, where he's not facing Snowmageddon, unlike Deborah, who is snowed in Virginia. So Deborah's no picture today because Deborah's hanging on a bit of wet string on the bandwidth, but she's here to join us. So, uh, we're glad to have roped you in, Deborah, and we're really glad to have you with us, Marco. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came
Sure,
to be involved in the accessibility world, and what it is you're doing?
sure. Accessibility has always been something that's super important to me. I was born with cerebral palsy, so I've had my disability since birth. And my family was always really pro getting out there and refusing to let anything hold you back. My dad was an immigrant from Italy, so he always wanted to, push the boundaries of what people think are possible. And so coming to North America was his chance, just like many immigrants, to start a new life for my family. And so when I was born and they discovered that I was going to have a disability, that didn't really discourage them. They just didn't know what that was going to mean. So throughout my life, getting involved in different sports, adapted sports, wheelchair basketball, track and field, horseback riding, lots of different things, I was able to see not only did I have an aptitude for sports, but that the world was a lot more accessible than people could assume. And so that led me down the path of going to the video game industry and becoming a video game tester and focusing on accessibility from a digital perspective. But then, of course, I have advocates here in Canada like Mr. Rick Hansen and Terry Fox who really showed me that it's a positive attitude and leading with that attitude that you can make real effective change. And so that inspired me to become a professional speaker and speak on the topics of overcoming adversity, but accessibility because of my disability has been something that has been hugely important to me. And so continuing to carve out the way and work with my local city hall and work with a bunch of different representatives to increase accessibility and increase people's awareness of that.
Okay, so absolutely with you on the whole positivity front. I believe that
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why we started Access Chat was to highlight the good work that people are doing and to not bemoan the fact that the world isn't perfect, but actually celebrate what is out there that is enabling people to live life to the fullest. So um, credit to you for your attitude. I'm interested a bit about to learn a bit more about Rick Hansen and Terry Fox because they're not familiar to me, being the other side of the Atlantic. So
Sure.
these guys obviously had a role to play in accessibility in Canada, but also wider.
Across the world, at least as far as the West Coast is concerned. So Rick Hansen, to start off with, he's a guy that did the Man in Motion tour in the 1980s, and Rick actually wheeled around the world in his wheelchair to raise awareness for spinal cord injury, as he's unfortunately had a spinal cord injury as a teenager. And so he actually wheeled his wheelchair through all the major cities across the world, and he ended up coming from Vancouver, going to the Great Wall of China, going to all of these iconic places, and then coming all the way back to Vancouver at the end of it all. I believe Rick's tour took him, I think, about a year to do. I could be wrong on that. But since then, he was able to start an entire foundation and business that is focused on spinal cord injury, and now they've broadened their perspectives to uncovering the potential of all people with disabilities across the world. And so, if you Google Rick Hansen, you won't miss it. He's got quite a history, and he's a big mentor for myself. Now on to Terry. Terry's a guy
Uh,
who, yeah, go ahead, Trevor. Did you have something to
well,
add, Deborah?
I was just going to say, yeah, I did. I was just going to say that Rick Hansen, I agree. He is just, he's, he's just an amazing man. He's accomplished so much, and he's
Hmm.
been such a powerful advocate and champion and in the U.S. And he's very well known in North America. He's just seen as a just a superstar in
Yeah,
our
and
world.
he
So
is. And Deborah,
really amazing. Yeah.
No, he is, and to be honest with you, Rick was my mentor for like somebody I looked up to for many years before I personally knew him. And then within the last year or so, I actually had the pleasure of working directly with Rick on some of his initiatives in the city. So when you get the chance to work with somebody that you've looked up to your entire life, it's definitely not something that you pass up for sure. So, and he is as nice of a man as people assume that he is. It's not an act. It's who he really is. And he's doing great things, and he's leading by example. So it's because of that that I feel the same. I need to lead by example. Um, and then to go on to somebody like Terry Fox. Terry is a guy who's from a suburb, another city called Burnaby, here in sort of Vancouver region. And Terry, unfortunately, he got cancer at an early age in his leg, and he had, unfortunately, as a result, had to have his leg amputated. But to raise awareness about cancer, he started his own run to raise money for cancer awareness. And he started his run, and he got quite a lot of local media attention for it. As a result, actually, he unfortunately passed away before he could finish his run due to the cancer overtaking his body. But he made such a strong impact here in the West Coast that every year all of the elementary schools and secondary schools do something called the Terry Fox Run. And that's in memory of Terry, and they do it all across Canada. And it's something that the physical education classes get involved in, and they also highlight and educate the students on Terry's story and what he's done for our communities. So it's a pretty impactful thing.
Okay, so yeah, I just Googled both of them. That's one of the joys of having home set up, 2 screens and all. So yeah, look impressive. So they're quite some role models to live up to. So what are you doing now in terms of what is the advocacy work that you're
That I'm
actively
working on now. Absolutely. So I started my own business about 4.5 years ago as a professional speaker, and so there's a couple of things that I'm working on. So one of the main things I'm doing in the areas of accessibility is I was actually approached by my local city hall. And was asked to come in and help them work on accessibility and inclusion strategies for the entire city. Which is really cool. So I don't live in Vancouver. I live in another city very close to Vancouver called Surrey. And so I'm in Surrey right now, my home office, and the city of Surrey asked me if I would come in and work with them on these accessibility and inclusion strategies, which includes, speaking to Mayor's Council about the strategies that we're putting in place, developing standards that we can go that is more above and beyond, because we don't have an Americans with Disabilities Act equivalent here in Canada. We don't have a Canadians with Disabilities Act. So we're trying to really set the bar and create gold standards that people can follow in the areas of accessibility. But in my speaking business, I've done a lot of mentorship for individuals with disabilities and overcoming their own self-perceptions to become the best version of themselves that they feel they really truly can be, and really present their story in a way that they feel accurately represents themselves. But I think the most exciting thing I've had the opportunity to do is before starting my business, from a very young age, I got the first opportunity to speak in front of a large audience when I was 10 years old, as they used to do a lot of telethons to raise money for charity. And I was involved in one called the Easter Seals Timmy's Christmas Telethon. And so what that was to raise money for individuals with disabilities to go to summer camp as they were kids. And I had the fortunate opportunity to go to these camps as a kid, which were fully adapted. And that's when I really got exposure to the media, was being a 10-year-old on this stage in front of an audience of thousands of people, plus being broadcasted nationally. And, I really saw the power that words could have by being in front of an audience and using the media for good, as opposed to some of the negative things that you see in the news and in the media these days. And that sent me down a spiral of really positive trends and different things of being able to make a difference and an impact. And as a result, I've been able to be a spokesperson for several not-for-profit charities across Canada to raise awareness about their initiatives and to really shed a light on the positive things that can happen for people with disabilities, so long as you give them the supports that are needed. And so it's been a real blessing. So advocacy work, spokesman work, and then of course the mentorship and keynote presentations, I would say, kind of encompass all of those areas of accessibility.
Okay. So you mentioned one thing that's of interest to me, particularly, which is the fact that you don't have a Canadians with Disabilities Act. Now, a while back on Access Chat, we had David Lepofsky on.
Hmm.
He's one of the guys that was behind the AODA in
That's right.
Ontario.
Yep.
And I'm still in touch with David on Twitter, and he's busy campaigning right now for the Canadians with Disabilities Act. So, do you
That's
think that
right.
with the new Trudeau government that this is much more likely to happen now?
I believe so. I think that Mr. Trudeau is somebody who is a forward thinker. He understands that the way that things were being done in my country before weren't working, and I think that he does put a positive foot forward in terms of making sure that everyone in our country is being represented in the best light. I know that he believes that diversity creates creativity and ingenuity within our country and around the world. And so to highlight the diversity that everyone brings, whether you want to put a label on it of disability or not, or an ethnicity, or whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, we're all a mosaic which make up this beautiful world that we live in. And I think that representatives like Mr. Trudeau are really trying to highlight that, because you recognize the strengths that other people bring, because not everybody is good at everything, but everybody is good at something. So together, I think that we're good at really highlighting that and working as a team. And I think that that's his sort of initiative moving forward.
Great. Antonio, do you have a question?
I was following his keynote at the World Economic Forum, and it was actually highlighting the importance of diversity and how can enable a creativity in Canada. So it was very interesting, and then you see somehow how someone at this level is influencing other leaders from other countries,
That's
because
right.
they just need to say something as well. They can't just stay in silence and look at. So it was very positive, the message that was, and I think it can be usually influential for the whole community.
I agree. And, unlike other prime ministers before him, I really think that his age is an asset. Before he got into office, people criticized him saying he's too young, he's not ready. But I don't believe that, because people forget that his father, when his father was in office, he was around the same age as Justin is today. And so the irony to that is that just because he brings a different perspective or a different background to running our country isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we need to shake things up. Both across Canada and the US, things need to change dramatically. And if they don't change, we're not going to have a world left to live in. So we might as well be doing the best that we can while we're here, because if it's just focused on the economy and money and making money, it's not going to matter if we don't have a planet to live in. There'll be no economy to worry about or focus on when there's nothing to be worried about as far as our resources are concerned. So I applaud Mr. Trudeau for taking a stand in what it is that he's doing. And for the first time ever, a lot of individuals in the US are taking notice of Canadian politics because he's doing things so differently. It also doesn't hurt that he's a good-looking guy. So there's that aspect of it as well. I don't know why that makes a difference, but they say the most attractive politicians generally get the most votes. I don't know why that would be the case, but it's part of it.
So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Please go, Deborah.
Well, no. Unfortunately, that is definitely the case in the United States. It seems like it should be based on what you bring to the table, but whatever. But I agree that the United States is fascinated with what's happening in Canada, and Canada is leading the way in many aspects of disability inclusion and accessibility. And so, just once again, what the Rick Hansen Foundation has done. I mean, and what you did in Vancouver, once again, to make it the most accessible city, definitely in North America, but probably in the world. There's a lot of very, very powerful things happening in Canada. But I would just like to say, make a comment, I think, not necessarily a question. But the thing that so impresses me about you, Marcus, is that I think that you understand that to have a very positive, powerful attitude, to really accept who you are, no
Hmm.
apologies, and then to mentor others. It's really, really refreshing to have someone that's a younger leader really having such a powerful voice. Neil and I were talking a little while ago about another voice that I will not mention, who's got a very negative, almost nasty voice in our global community, and it really tears things down that the rest of us are trying to build up. I mean,
Hmm.
we want the world to see that disabilities is just part of life. I mean, we all add value to the conversations, and there are things that you can say that nobody can say as well as you can, and there. So
Absolutely.
I just am really impressed with the power of your message, your passion, your enthusiasm. So I, I'm just really grateful for the work that you're doing, and that Rick Hansen was there, to help mentor you and give you a voice as well. He's one of the leaders that has done that. So, and that is what
Yeah.
we're trying to capture here on Access Chat. So,
I,
it's mainly a statement, but
no,
I think we need more voices like yours.
I totally know. I totally agree, and that's kind of I want to pay it forward by helping to create more voices like myself, but within individuals' own stories and their own light. I think it's so important. I've sort of shaped my life around the opportunity that everything that you imagine is possible is at your fingertips to create. It's just literally having a good team around you and people that support you and focus and help you to uncover what it is you truly want to do in this world. And so because of that, I try to be that person and that pillar for a lot of the people that I come across in the world. And as a result, I've been able to do some really cool things. I mean, I'm still a Rick Hansen ambassador, and I do go around to schools and speak about Rick's story and how it ties into my own personal life and my own personal story. But I think the thing for me, the most rewarding thing is when I'm speaking in front of an audience and I see, little pockets of people. I have those aha moments where it may be a story about my grandfather or something like that, where they relate back to somebody who was really a powerful figure for them in their life. And you see their eyes light up. Even when I'm sitting on the stage, I can see their eyes go, and it's in that moment that I know that I've done my job, because it's not about them connecting with my personal story. It's about making a personal connection to their own story. And if you can do that, then you've really done your job well. And that can be around any topic, whether it's accessibility, whether it's inclusion, or whether it's just having a belief in yourself.
One of the topics that I would like to bring here because of some stories that I recently had around me is
Sure.
about young parents. So who have kids and sometimes they have difficulties dealing with the situation that they are in. Sometimes they are lost. They and sometimes the doctors or the staff around them during that time of challenge and difficulties are not really as positive, and then they are simply lost, in
Mhm.
fact. So I would like to know from your perspective what type of contacts, if you have any, with young parents, and what type of message can you provide us here?
Well, I would say for young parents, as I witnessed my parents, going through the challenges of raising a child with a disability, um, the thing is that I heard a quote once that leadership means keeping your fears to yourself, but sharing your courage. And as sort of a blanket statement that is, I think that parents, especially parents with children with disabilities, they represent that in the nth degree. At least my parents did. Even though they may have been scared or they didn't know necessarily what they were doing, much like any parent when you're first starting out having children, they just did their best to show us, my sister and I, as I have a sister, an older sister who doesn't have a disability, that we were on equal playing fields. And even though I had a disability and she didn't, we were treated exactly the same. And so even though I couldn't get involved in soccer like my dad wanted to, like a true blue Italian that he is, he still took my sister to soccer practice. And after my sister would come home, even though I wasn't able to move around as quickly as she did, they encouraged me to get down on my knees, and I would play soccer with her outside on my hands and knees if that's what it would take. And getting involved and included in my own family like that really set the bar as to how I wanted to live my life. And it's because of that, and it's because of my parents' parenting, that they weren't sheltering me from the truth, but they were highlighting the things that were more important about us as a family. And that's family, that's togetherness, and that's, even though things got scary sometimes, they were very honest and upfront. And I think that if parents are open and honest and upfront with their kids, and, you know, I know it's harder to say this when they're younger and saying that mommy and daddy are having a tough time, could you maybe do this? But maybe show them in interactive games or different ways that the child may connect to the message you're trying to convey to them, but in a way that they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And that worked for me, and I want to carry that message forward when my wife and I do plan to have kids ourselves. We don't have any kids yet, but we're hoping to try maybe within the next year or so. So I'll let you know how that goes.
Okay. Good luck. So I think it's really an interesting thing that where we're looking at paying it forwards, because it's really important that we bring people of the next generation to play in being able to advocate for themselves, feel that they're empowered to speak. So you say that you're mentoring people. So what are sort of some of the tips that you would give to young people when they're venturing out on stage for the first time, or if they're going to go and present and talk for themselves? I know that when I first spoke in front of an audience of 500 or 600 people, I was pretty nervous.
Yep.
But you come off afterwards, it's a big buzz. The endorphin rush afterwards is quite similar to doing a bungee jump.
It is. It really is. Quite simply, I'll be completely frank with you. I've done hundreds of talks, and I still get the butterflies. And the reason being is because I care, and it's because I'm passionate about what it is that I say. I think every single thing that I've gone and I've been able to do is because I believed in myself, as token as that sounds. And so I remind the individuals that I'm mentoring is to remain authentic and remember the fact that the audience doesn't know word for word what you're about to say. So as long as you have the general premise of what it is and the story that you want to tell, make sure that story is engaging and that you're indicating something where you're starting off with the message, overall message you want to deliver to the audience, and that you're ending with that message. But what happens in between is about that pure, raw emotion. If you can make them laugh, cry, and remember something, you've done your job. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to remember what you did or said, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel. It's that real emotion of them connecting to something that happened to you in your life and how that relates to them and how they can use tangible steps to move forward in their life that's going to be the most successful. And that's why nothing against other speakers with disabilities, but I didn't want to just be another speaker with a disability that just talked about cerebral palsy and, really pumped people up and inspired them for 15 minutes. And then when I leave, about an hour to 2 hours later, they barely remember what I said. And so that's why I created a system called the CUBE principle, which stands for Creatively Utilize Your Best Energy. And that actually was born out of the fact that people kept saying to me, how are you such a positive guy? How are you able to accomplish these things in your life? And I couldn't really put it into words. And I said, well, I'm a fairly creative person. I recognize the things that I'm not so strong at, so I utilize the strengths of people around me. In order to be at my best, I know that I've had to make some sacrifices throughout my life. And then, of course, it's about recognizing the energy and the type of energy you're putting out into the world. And so one day I was in the shower, and boom, popped into my head, creatively utilize your best energy. That's really what it comes down to. What are you doing in your life to be the best person that you possibly can be? And the more that you focus on those things, the more, incredibly, that these things start to happen for you in your life.
Yeah. I think it's a great acronym. I like it a lot. I can also see your Italian ancestry coming through, because your hands are moving like you're directing aircraft into land right now.
Which is why I have to use a lapel mic when I'm on stage, because otherwise the sound is further and yeah. So I've had event managers have a heyday if they don't get me a lapel mic. But yeah, I think that you have to represent the truest version of yourself, and this is me. This is what you see on stage. This is what you see in my home office, and this is what, unfortunately, my wife has to deal with every single day. So.
Yeah. Well, we want the enthusiasm. That's the most important thing. I think you raised a really good point around getting people to connect with not you, but with something that connects to them, that
That's
means
right.
something to them, because that's what's going to fire up their enthusiasm and get their focus on whatever it is they want to do. And I know that I'm doing what I do because I'm enthused about it. We're
That's
doing
right.
Access Chat because we love doing it. We love what what it's able to achieve, the message that it puts across, and the fact that we get to talk to great people.
Well, I feel the same way. I'm talking to some great people right now. And that's the thing is that no matter how much many people that I meet and how much I'm able to go out and do these things, I'm inspired every day because I always learn something new from the people that I come across in my life. I've been on panels before where they call me a disability expert, and I actually have to stop the moderator and say, can we change my title actually? I don't like to be called an expert because I'm not an expert on disability. I'm a disability advocate, an accessibility advocate, but I wouldn't say I'm a disability expert because of the fact that I can't relate to what it's like to be completely blind or hard of hearing or all of these things, but I can relate to my own scenarios. So working with Rick, for example, at the Rick Hansen Foundation, and being able to be shown some experiences and perspectives from these other disabilities or other abilities has really opened my eyes to a whole new world as well. And so I become as more of an advocate as the years go on, but you can only become an expert in the things that you go through in your life and you're able to focus on. So I think that part's important to say as well.
Okay. I have to forgive the noise. I am being pestered by a hound here. Oh dear.
There you go.
Everybody, all of our regulars will know him already. All right,
Yes, Mr. Bonbon.
Yeah. So I think it's again something that's of interest. How there is no learning. There's very little out there to teach people about these kind of topics. So the best way for me to learn, and for Deborah and for Antonio, is through experience, through talking to other people, learning about their experiences. So
That's right.
So it's another benefit of what we're doing right now. It is that it's a very rich learning experience. Over the last year, we've talked to 50 plus people, and so that's 50 plus lessons that I've had that have enriched my knowledge and my experience. So I think it's been really good for us so far, aside from the ride that we've had on social media. Deborah,
Well,
did I
thanks,
catch?
Neil. Yeah.
Deborah, did you want to say something?
No, I love. I I thought that was such a good point you brought up about being an because it's unfolding, and so I have knowledge in a lot of because areas, but I don't think anybody's an expert yet. I don't think we in society what people with disabilities really can do. I think we're starting to figure it out, and I think that people like you, Marcos, that have a really good attitude and know that you're here to make a difference and your birth was not an accident, and you're here to empower others to find their greatness. I think, but I think, what is an expert? Because there's just so much work to be done. So I'm just fascinated listening to your message and what you're saying and your walk, and I can't wait to hear when you and your kids have, you and your wife have multiple kids. It's just very exciting to get to see a young leader in action, and you're able come and motor talk people probably world,
Awesome. Well, no, thanks, Deborah. I mean, you cut out a few times there, but I got the general gist of what it is that you were saying, and I really, really appreciate that. I think that humility is one of the greatest virtues you can have, and so if you can remain humble but create impact and create change, then I think that that's the kind of leader that I like to represent myself as and the person that I want to be. And my true attitude towards these things is that you're only as able as the environment and the people's attitudes that are around you. And so I've become extremely able because of the environment that I'm in, being in the Vancouver region of Canada, but also it's the attitudes of the people that I'm around. You know, they say you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and so I surround myself with really positive people because of the fact that they've really helped to shape who I am. And so you recognize that you are as strong as the people that you are around you, and maybe that you can really create something unique and experience unique for other people to carry forward. So.
Thank you. That's a great point to end on, because we've reached the end of our half hour. So I'd like to thank you again, Marco. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank